Welcome to Capital Logic. Most people think they understand how Apple's $1 trillion comeback was built on one decision Steve Jobs made in 1997. They don't. Today we are going beneath the surface to show you what's actually happening. If that kind of analysis is what you're looking for, like this video and subscribe now. Here's what the numbers really say. In 1997, Apple was 90 days from bankruptcy. Yet Steve Jobs' most critical decision wasn't to invent a new product, but to drastically cut 70% of its existing offerings and accept a bailout from Microsoft. That's a counterintuitive move for a company on the brink, wouldn't you say? Stay until the end. I'll break down 3 lessons from Apple's playbook you can apply to your business this week. If you want business breakdowns you can actually use, hit subscribe and the bell. You've seen the headlines, haven't you? Apple, the company that redefined personal technology, the first to hit a $1 trillion valuation, now sitting at an astonishing $4.516 trillion market capitalization as of August 2026. But what if I told you that this incredible success story, this almost mythical comeback, wasn't built on a revolutionary new product? Not the iPod, not the iPhone, not even the Mac itself. Instead, it was forged in the fires of desperation, born from a decision so radical, so counterintuitive, that it initially drew boos from Apple's most loyal fans. This is the story of how Apple, on the brink of oblivion, was saved by a single, audacious move orchestrated by Steve Jobs in 1997. To truly grasp the magnitude of what happened, you need to understand just how dire Apple's situation was in 1997. Forget the gleaming headquarters and the endless lines for new products. Back then, Apple wasn't just struggling, it was bleeding out. The company had accumulated over $1 billion in losses in the preceding 4 quarters. Think about that for a moment, $1 billion gone in just 1 year. Apple reported a net loss of $1.045 billion in fiscal year 1997, a grim milestone marking the only year in Apple's history where it reported losses in all 4 quarters. The warning signs have been flashing for a while. In January 1997, Apple reported a $120 million loss for its fiscal first quarter, which, at the time, was the worst in the company's 20-year history. This wasn't just a bad quarter, it was a symptom of a deeper malaise. Apple's market capitalization, a mere $2.3 billion in 1997, was barely higher than its IPO day valuation, and by December 31st, 1997, it had plummeted further to $1.5 billion. To put that in perspective, a company that would one day be worth trillions was, at this point, valued at less than a struggling startup today. Market share? Forget about it. Apple, once a pioneer, had seen its global market share dwindle to a pathetic 3.1% by the fiscal fourth quarter ending September 30th, 1997. From a high of 5.2% just a year prior, they were losing ground rapidly to the dominant Windows PC ecosystem. The company was adrift, rudderless, churning out a bewildering array of products that confused customers and diluted its brand. It was a slow-motion corporate train wreck, and everyone, it seemed, was waiting for the final impact. Enter Steve Jobs. He had returned to Apple in 1997, first as an advisor, then as interim CEO, after being ousted more than a decade earlier. His return was met with a mix of hope and skepticism. Could even he save this sinking ship? The answer, as it turned out, involved a move so audacious, so seemingly contradictory, that it sent shockwaves through the tech world. On August 6, 1997, at the Macworld Expo in Boston, Jobs stood on stage, a familiar figure once again, and announced a partnership that many believed was unthinkable, an alliance with Microsoft. Yes, that Microsoft, Apple's fiercest rival, the Goliath to Apple's struggling David. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral, a mixture of boos and applause. You could almost feel the collective gasp. How could Apple, the champion of individuality and design, align itself with the very company it had so often derided? But Jobs, ever the pragmatist when the stakes were highest, understood something crucial. Apple needed capital, and it needed software. Microsoft provided both. The deal included a $150 million investment in Apple for non-voting preferred stock. This wasn't just a handout, it was a lifeline. It injected much-needed cash into Apple's depleted coffers and, perhaps more importantly, signaled to the market that Apple wasn't dead yet. If Microsoft, the behemoth, was willing to invest, maybe there was still hope. The partnership went deeper than just cash. As part of the agreement, Apple committed to making Microsoft's Internet Explorer the default web browser on a Macintosh. And in a critical move for creative professionals who relied on Macs, Microsoft also pledged to develop and ship future versions of its Office productivity suite for Mac for at least 5 years. This secured the essential software ecosystem that kept many users tied to the Mac platform. Looking back, the financial implications of that $150 million investment are staggering. Microsoft, ever the shrewd investor, sold its entire stake in Apple by 2003 for $550 million, a healthy 260% return over 6 years. But here's the kicker. If Microsoft had held on to that $150 million investment, it would have been worth approximately $184 billion by 2025. Just imagine that. A decision made in desperation, a mere $150 million, could have grown into nearly $200 billion. It underscores just how undervalued Apple was at that moment, and how profoundly this partnership would reshape its destiny. With the Microsoft deal providing a critical financial and strategic breathing room, Jobs turned his attention inward. What he found was a company drowning in its own complexity. Before his return, Apple was producing around 70 different products or variations. 70. It was, as Jobs himself famously put it, crazy. This sprawling, unfocused product line was a symptom of a company that had lost its way, trying to be everything to everyone, and, in the process, becoming nothing distinct to anyone. Jobs' first major move upon his return was not to launch a new product, but to radically simplify Apple's product line, slashing it by over 70%. He didn't just trim the fat, he performed radical surgery. He envisioned a clear, concise strategy, boiling Apple's offerings down to a simple 2x2 matrix, consumer and professional, each with desktop and portable versions. This meant focusing on just 4 core products. Out went products like the Newton, a handheld computer that, while innovative, didn't fit Jobs' future vision for Apple and was discontinued in 1998. This wasn't just about cutting costs. It was about regaining focus, clarity, and purpose. It was about telling customers, and more importantly, Apple's own engineers, exactly what Apple stood for. This brutal simplification wasn't just a business strategy, it was a psychological reset. It forced Apple to concentrate its limited resources, its brightest minds, and its creative energy on a handful of products that could truly make an impact. It was a gamble, certainly, but one that would soon pay off in ways few could have predicted. But simplifying the product line was only one piece of the puzzle. To truly change perceptions, Apple needed to redefine its identity, to tell a new story to the world. And that story began with 2 simple, yet grammatically incorrect, words. But even with a streamlined product line and a rival's investment, Apple still needed to tell its story. It needed to remind the world and itself what it stood for. This wasn't just about selling computers anymore, it was about selling a philosophy. In 1997, just as Jobs was dismantling the old Apple, he launched the Think Different advertising campaign. This wasn't a product ad, it was a manifesto. Created by TBWA Chiat Day, the campaign featured black and white footage of iconic figures: Albert Einstein, Mahatma Gandhi, Pablo Picasso. These weren't just famous people, they were rebels, innovators, dreamers. They were the ones who dared to see the world differently. Jobs himself insisted on the grammatically unconventional slogan "Think Different" over "Think Differently" to emphasize the adjective different. It wasn't just about how you thought, but what you were. This campaign didn't promise faster processors or more memory. It promised inspiration. It told you that if you were one of the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, then Apple was for you. It was a masterclass in brand repositioning, aligning Apple not with technology, but with creativity, individuality, and change. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about reclaiming Apple's soul. The stage was set, the vision articulated, but the company still needed a hit product. Something tangible to prove that this new, leaner Apple could still innovate. And in 1998, it delivered. The iMac. It was unlike anything else on the market. A translucent, candy-colored, all-in-one computer that screamed personality. It was friendly, approachable, and most importantly, it was simple. Jobs had famously declared that the back of the computer should look as good as the front, because that's where people would see it in their home. The iMac was designed for the internet age, famously ditching the floppy disk drive in favor of USB and an Ethernet port, a bold move at the time. The public responded immediately. The iMac sold an astonishing 278,000 units in its first 6 weeks. This wasn't just a successful product launch, it was a lifeline. After years of bleeding cash, Apple went from losing $878 million in 1997 to making a $414 million profit in 1998. The iMac proved that Jobs' radical simplification, his focus on design, and his belief in a distinct Apple philosophy were not just viable, they were profitable. It was the first tangible proof that the comeback was real. But Jobs knew that a single product, no matter how iconic, wouldn't guarantee long-term success. He needed to build an entire ecosystem, a walled garden that would keep customers loyal and make switching to competitors difficult. This strategy began to solidify around the turn of the millennium. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, a revolutionary portable music player that could hold 1,000 songs in your pocket. It wasn't the first MP3 player, but it was the first to combine elegant design with an intuitive user interface and seamless integration with software. The iPod became a cultural phenomenon, but its true genius lay in what came next: iTunes. Launched initially as a music management application, iTunes evolved into the iTunes Store, a legal digital music marketplace that transformed the music industry. Apple didn't just sell hardware, it sold an experience, a complete solution for digital music. This ecosystem extended beyond digital content. In 2001, Apple also began opening its own Apple retail stores. These weren't just stores, they were temples to the brand, designed to provide a premium customer experience, offer hands-on product interaction, and build a community around Apple products. They became crucial for market positioning and customer experience, allowing Apple to control every aspect of the customer journey, from browsing to purchase to support. This vertical integration, controlling both hardware and software, and now retail, allowed for optimized performance and a consistent user experience that competitors struggled to match. The decision to cultivate a tightly integrated ecosystem of hardware, software, and services created significant switching costs for users, locking them into the Apple universe. And then there was the quiet revolution happening behind the scenes. In 1998, Jobs recruited Tim Cook as Senior Vice President for Worldwide Operations. Cook, a master of logistics, revolutionized Apple's supply chain. He implemented a just-in-time inventory system, slashing inventory time from 30 days to a mere 2 to 6 days. He consolidated Apple's primary suppliers from over 100 to just 24, negotiating better terms and customized components. Cook even pre-purchased global supplies of critical components, effectively starving competitors of parts. This operational efficiency, often overlooked, was as critical as any product launch. It transformed Apple into a lean, mean, profit-generating machine capable of scaling its innovations globally. By the time the iPhone launched in 2007, Apple wasn't just a computer company anymore. It was a digital lifestyle company built on a foundation of radical simplification, strategic partnerships, iconic branding, integrated ecosystems, and unparalleled operational excellence. The stage was set for a decade of unprecedented growth, culminating in Apple becoming the first-ever trillion-dollar company in 2018 and reaching an astounding $4.516 trillion market capitalization by August 2026. But how did this hidden strategy, this seemingly counterintuitive approach, translate into such extraordinary long-term success? What are the underlying principles that allowed Apple to not just survive, but to dominate? Now here are 3 lessons from Apple's playbook you can apply to your own business. Lesson 1. Focus on core strengths. Evaluate your product or service offerings and eliminate those that don't align with your core vision or profitability, even if they have historical significance. Apple, under Jobs, ruthlessly cut its product line from over 35 to just 4, a move that seemed insane at the time, but brought clarity and efficiency to a struggling company. Lesson 2. Strategic partnerships can save you. Don't be afraid to collaborate with competitors or unlikely allies if it provides crucial resources, market access, or time to rebuild your business. Remember, Apple was on the brink of bankruptcy when it accepted a $150 million investment from Microsoft, its biggest rival, buying it precious time and validation. Lesson 3. Master your supply chain. Optimize your inventory, consolidate suppliers, and consider pre-purchasing critical components to gain efficiency and a competitive edge. Jobs didn't just design great products, he revolutionized how they were made and delivered, turning a logistical nightmare into a lean, efficient machine that fueled Apple's growth. If you want more business breakdowns you can actually use, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Now you know what most people never bother to find out about how Apple's $1 trillion comeback was built on one decision Steve Jobs made in 1997. The question is what you do with that knowledge. Subscribe to Capital Logic for more breakdowns like this one, and hit the notification bell so you catch every episode. The next case study drops soon.